I'm very proud to announce that this video has once again been sponsored by History Hit. That's right, the History Hit. The History Hit that brings you the stories that shaped the world through its award-winning podcast network and online history channel. It's like Netflix, but it's all history and therefore brilliant. Watch hundreds of hours of original history documentaries anywhere, anytime, on any device, brought to you by expert historians like Dan Snow, Professor Susanna Lipscomb, Dan Jones, and more. As well as already having hundreds of expert-led programmes, they add 2 more every week. History Hit also launch 19 new episodes weekly across 8 podcasts, including the world's leading history podcast, Dan Snow's History Hit, which I have been listening to for years at this point, since I was living up in Scotland, in Glasgow. So what you need to do now is get 50% off your first 3 months when you use the code Welsh Viking at the checkout. So head over to historyhit.com, there's a link in the description. You click that link, you get 50% off your first 3 months when you use the code Welsh Viking, and you can watch amazing shows like Life and Death in Roman London and Ray Mears' The Bow. It is so good, it's great entertainment, and it's really informative. Check out History Hit, go and follow that link. Hello! So today we're talking about London in the Viking Age and why there's not a great deal out there about it. There are good reasons for this. London, as we know it today, is this huge conurbation. It's a massive metropolis full of millions of people going about their lives. The city of London itself is the bit in the middle, the bit where all the bankers are. And it's really boring. It's not really a proper city at all. It's just a business district. So that's why if you ever go to the City of London, the actual square mile on the weekend, the pubs are closed, the cafes and restaurants are shut. It's pretty much dead. Which I think is very, very sad, because that is the original London. That is Londinium, that square mile as they call it. And the original Roman walled city of London is quite small. It goes basically from Tower Hill in the east to Farringdon in the west, Cripplegate up in the northwest, and it almost borders the River Fleet. Here's a map. It's that bit. And the original purpose of the city was it was a legionary fortress. There's a fortress in the northwest corner that forms the northwest corner of the city, a bit like York, in fact, and a bit like Winchester, where this is a legionary fortress, and then around that fortress you have what's called a vicus, and the vicus is the civilian settlement, the city that builds up around the legionary fortress itself. And that's what happens in Londinium. Londinium, the walls that follow the modern road, called originally enough London Wall, are the city walls that have been there for nearly 2,000 years. And when the Romans leave this city that has a population of between 10 and 20,000-ish, we think, call it 15k, basically declines really fast, because there were thousands of troops based in Londinium at various points. And once those troops leave, a huge chunk of the population leaves, and a huge chunk of the reason why people are living there, to supply the army with boots and leatherwork and booze and entertainment, no longer have a reason to be there. So London as a military town no longer exists. So it goes into a rapid decline, and people basically abandon London for centuries. When the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes start coming over in the migration period, so before the Viking Age, we're talking in the 6th century, basically, in 7 centuries, they too don't seem to bother with Londinium itself, the actual fortress of London and then the walled city. They sort of figure, well, we need farmland to grow crops, so what's the point of having this urban centre? It's just stone. We need earth that we can till. So instead of occupying the old fortified city, they go to the west, to what is now the Strand. So if you think about places like the Strand, Westminster and Fulham, around that sort of area, and Chelsea, that is where people are settling. That is where the Anglo-Saxons are settling, and they're farming. That is farmable land. There's a beach there, nice long beach for you to put boats in so that you can fish. That is where people establish London Wick. And London Wick is London town. A Wick is basically a town. Think Hampton Wick, Greenwich, Greenwick, places like that. Hampton Wick. And that's where the Anglo-Saxons are establishing themselves. When the Vikings start raiding England in the 8th and 9th centuries, this town too starts to decline. It's basically an undefended rural town on the banks of a lovely navigable river that the Vikings are well suited to raiding up. So they come up this river, they start raiding. They're probably raiding things like the Anglo-Saxon church, which is basically by the Tower, All Hallows by the Tower, is a church established in the 7th century. That probably suffered from the Vikings. We have plenty of other evidence of the Vikings raiding churches and wealthy sites from rivers in the British Isles, in France. We know that that was part of their MO. It's how the Volga trade route started, for goodness sake. And the Anglo-Saxons at London Wick basically think, do you know what? Stuff this. We don't have the defences, we don't have the manpower. We're just going to basically abandon the town. There is some evidence of continuity. There is some slight evidence of continuity from scattered coin finds and pottery finds. So there may have been a few people who said, you know what, I'm just going to stick to my farm here. I don't have anything that the Vikings are going to be interested in taking. They might even buy some farm produce off me. But that is west of Londinium. Londinium at this point seems to be basically abandoned, with the potential exceptions of a couple of churches. There may have been continuity of use at a couple of churches, and there's a theory that's not really yet supported strongly by archaeology, that there was an ecclesiastical community that carried on living in the fortified city. More on that in a minute. So the big sort of climax of when London goes from being this dead, abandoned town to re-establishing itself as a large city in Britain is in the 9th century. So when the great heathen army that I mentioned in a previous video starts basically wiping the floor with the Anglo-Saxons for 20 years, they start to establish themselves in the east and the northeast and in the southeast of England as the Danelaw. And the Danelaw is effectively territory that's controlled for 100 and something years by the Vikings and their descendants. And one of the only people who manages to organise a solid, effective defence against this is Alfred of Wessex, Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great manages to defeat the army, the great heathen army, at the Battle of Edington. And at this point, these soldiers, these raiders, these conquerors have already spent a year in London in 871, 872. Now, we're not sure if that means that they used the fortified city of London or they were in London Wick. I suspect they were probably in the fortified city because they had to overwinter, and walls are handy if you're doing that. But after the Battle of Edington in 879, Alfred the Great effectively negotiates with the leaders of the Danelaw, the Scandinavians who've settled and become kings and rulers in their own rights of places like York, which is still firmly under Scandinavian control, and the Danelaw is established as a solid territory, and that's where we start seeing people pay things like Danegeld to prevent raids happening, and London is once again under Anglo-Saxon control. It's under the control of Alfred the Great. And over the next few years, Alfred makes plans to resettle cities, to fortify cities, and turn them from wicks into boroughs. And boroughs, or burghs, or burhs, depending on your pronunciation, who cares, it was over 1,000 years ago, are fortified cities. Think Edinburgh, and St Edmunds, Bury St Edmunds. It's fortified, it's a burg, it's a fortified city, and that's what London was and is again. And in 886, Alfred re-establishes the fortified city of London. He repairs the walls, repairs the gatehouses, some of them at least become gatehouses again, proper, and he gives a man called Ethelred the aldermanship. Ethelred is entrusted with Lundenburg, as alderman. And there is a theory, because there is a part of London called Aldermanbury, that Aldermanbury is the old fortress. So we have Londonbury, Lundenburg, and we have Aldermanbury. And Aldermanbury, theoretically, is the alderman's little sanctum sanctorum within the fortified city. So you've got the fortified city itself. Within that, the old fortress up near Cripplegate becomes where the alderman, where Ethelred is based. And the fact that we have a couple of churches within there, and the walls are still partly in place, roads are built that go around the walls, that all suggests that, yeah, the fortress was being used as a kind of a precinct, like an ecclesiastical precinct. If you look at York Minster and its precinct are in the dead centre of the former governor's palace of the Roman legionary fortress. So the proper fortress, the central fortress of York, is where the Minster is now, and that continues in use. And we see this in a couple of other places as well. I think I might be wrong in saying Exeter. I'm sure Editing Jimmy will correct me. But we see this in other places as well, where a church is established within the fortress. It's a nice walled precinct. It's a perfect place to build your church. It's slightly more private, slightly more secure, makes you look special, makes you look centralised, makes you look grander, because you've got this wall around you. And that is what we think might have happened at Aldermanbury in London. The other parts of the walled city just start being a city, and we've got evidence that in the 9th century the river is being fortified with stakes. These big spiky sticks get tamped down into the silt of the Thames. We know that an embankment is built on the west side of the Thames, so kind of the north bank of the river, if you like, and places start cropping up like Westminster. And Westminster is actually thorny. It's an island in the Thames at this point. It's really difficult to picture it now. If you go over Westminster Bridge and you go in and see the Houses of Parliament and you see Elizabeth Tower and you see all of the big buildings and all the cars rushing past you, and you think, well, this is just another part of a big city. But 1100 years ago, that was a separate island, and it was just being exploited at the time of Alfred the Great. And we've got some amazing archaeology from London in bits and bobs. The problem with London for archaeologists is it is built on. It's all built up. So the only opportunity that we get to explore London as it was is when a building is completely demolished to its foundations, because then we have access to the foundations, we have access to the earth underneath, and that is how we discovered things like Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, the Mithraeum, and, to an extent, the old Roman walls. Thanks very much, World War II. Genuinely, the Blitz is partly the reason we know where all of the wall was, because so much of the city was rubble at that point that it was fairly easy to see things again. So how much actual Viking Age archaeology do we have from London itself? Not London Wick, London Bury. The answer is not very much, and that's probably not surprising to you now, because you know that the city was largely abandoned. But we do have some cool stuff. So from Lambeth, from Bishop's Ward in Lambeth, which is just south of the river, I know it's not technically in London Bury, but we have a lovely drinking horn, and this drinking horn is kind of insular in style, which means it's from the British Isles and Ireland, which for the purposes of this, we're kind of, because we do have parallels of it from lots of other places, including Llangors Cranog, and the Llangors Cranog, actually I've got a replica of it, is it easily reachable? No, Editing Jimmy will put a picture of it up though. I've got a replica of it made by Adam Parsons at Blue Axe Reproductions, who makes the most beautiful reproductions you've ever seen. It's very similar in style, with this sort of closed loop mouth thing going on. We have lots of coins, we have pottery sherds, we have a couple of skeletons here and there. We've also got some really interesting straps and strap ends, these things, which kind of look like sword belt distributors to me. And they're found in an assemblage with a number of strap ends in Trewiddle style and various other styles of art. And it's interesting that they're all found together, implying that they're all part of the same complex of straps. So is this a sword belt? Is this horse harnessing? I don't know. But this was found in Billingsgate. And Billingsgate, where the big market is slap bang in the middle of Londonbury. So this is right in the middle of the walled city. I mentioned that we have old churches. All Hallows by the Tower has a 7th century Saxon archway. So this archway that survived being bombed in the Second World War is from the 7th century, about 675. It's still there. Was this church used continuously through the Viking Age? We don't know. Did it survive the occupation in 871, 872 because it was a useful place for the Great Heathen Army to sleep? We don't know. I'm not sure, I can't tell you. But there is other stuff here and there as well. We have spears. We have a lovely spearhead, which was found, I believe, in Fulham. So, yeah, London Wick rather than London Bury. But beyond that, the coolest thing for me is this amazing Ringerike-style memorial stone. This is a gravestone. This is a grave slab. So this lovely early 11th century stone was put here by Gina and Toki, and we know that because it says Gina and Toki put this stone up. We don't know who to, the name is missing, but this is a really clear indication from the old churchyard of St. Paul's that, yeah, that's St. Paul's, that one. This indicates that Old Norse speakers were living and dying in London in the early 11th century. Is this something that was put up just prior to the St. Brice's Day massacre? Is this something that was put up to honour somebody who was killed in the massacre? I don't know. I couldn't hazard a guess. Could this just be a gravestone to somebody from the early 11th century who happened to be fairly well up on their Scandinavian artistic styles? Yeah, it could well be, and probably is. That's what this is. It's a Viking Age gravestone. And that is super cool, because this is one of the only solid bits of Old Norse archaeology that we've got from actual London itself. And I wish there were more. I wish there were loads and loads and loads more, but we just haven't got that many opportunities to excavate that deep in London. A lot of stuff was damaged and destroyed through building the tube in the 19th century. The drainage that's been put in has damaged a lot as well. A lot of the deep foundations of some of the big buildings has also damaged an awful lot. Lots of the gatehouses have been demolished. Lots of the walls have been demolished and looted for stone. So there's not an awful lot around London that we get to actually examine that's from the Viking Age. And we know that places like Pudding Lane were metalled. They were metalled, they were cobbled in the 9th century. When Alfred the Great resettled the city, we know that there were buildings in this part of London that were being occupied, that were built and occupied by the Anglo-Saxons after Alfred rebuilt the town. But it's very, very rare that we actually get to look at them, that we get to excavate them, unless a major demolition happens. So, cross fingers that soon some of those big bank skyscrapers will get pulled down and we can actually go and excavate the City of London and see what archaeology is still left underneath there, because I think it would be absolutely fantastic if we could do that a little bit more frequently. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Thank you to all of my wonderful patrons for keeping me alive this month. Thank you to Leo for my wonderful gifts from all the way over in America. Leo, I hope you're feeling better. Thank you so much for your letter. And thank you to all of the other people who sent me stuff to my P.O. Box. My new P.O. Box is now in the description, and I am working on getting it onto all of my other videos. Big shout out to Craig from the Will I Vike It podcast. I was interviewed during York Viking Festival by the beautiful Craig, who bought me a beautiful dinner, and we discuss all sorts of things. So if you're interested in food, if you're interested in the Viking Age, you should definitely go and check out Will I Vike It. I think it's all on Spotify, and I think my episode is coming out the Sunday after this video comes out. So go check out the Will I Vike It podcast, and until the next time, Tana Tronissa. Hwyl fawr. Bye bye.